what does it say if we're willing to break the commitments we make to ourselves on a regular basis? It doesn't say very much about how we think about ourselves. So for me, just putting it in the mind frame of I'm going to work out because I made that commitment to myself. That's the only reason I'm doing it. Because I'm going to follow through on a commitment that I make to myself because I'm worthy of that. And
Yeah.
because that builds my trust and my confidence. And of course, that's going to help me in all other aspects of my life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Renew Podcast. I am your host, Kristen Andre, and as always, we are here to help you reclaim your business and your life without losing your edge. And speaking of edgy, I have a fantastic guest with us today, my friend Nicole Kalil, who is a best-selling author of the recently released Validation is for Parking, is with us today, and we are going to be talking all things confidence, which is a huge topic. I know with my girlfriends, with all the women I have the opportunity to coach, with those of you guys in our Renew community, this has been a hot button item. So Nicole, I know, first of all, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. Being described as edgy is like one of my favorites, so
Right?
thanks.
I know. Well, and it's so funny because
Like,
you
forget nice and sweet.
I know.
Edgy is what I'm going for.
I know. People are like, she's sassy. I'm like, I love this. But it's true because it wasn't always that way. And that's what I want to get into, because when I'm reading Validation is for Parking, and when I first started the book, I had to laugh because you and I have extremely similar backgrounds. We were formerly with the same, firm. We had very similar tracks in our career in a very male-dominated industry. And, you talked about the beginning of the book, the imposter syndrome, and kind of all the things you were doing and trying to be the things that they thought you would be. But, I would have thought you were hugely confident. And I think people would have said the same thing about me, is like, oh my gosh, she's so confident in that. But Validation for Parking is it gets real. I mean, you're really upfront about how things were. So first of all, what made you write this book?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a lot of reasons, but one of the ones at the top of the list is kind of what you said at the very beginning, is this is a hot topic for a lot of people, and more often than not, the people you don't think it's a hot topic for, right? I have interacted with so many women, people in general, but women especially at this point, that are executives, uber successful business owners, speaking across the country, and finding out that they struggle with confidence and they struggle with imposter syndrome and they have feelings of not being enough or good enough or not being able to handle it all or struggle with perfectionism and all the things. It was just eye-opening for me. And so I wanted to be real about that, because I do think I was one of those people outside looking in that looked the part, right?
Yeah.
I looked like the confident, independent, successful woman on the rise with my who needs a man attitude and,
Right.
My nice clothes and buying my second home by the time I'm 30 and all the things from the outside looking in that would sort of check the boxes. But it was a no match. It literally did not even, connect with how I felt on the inside. And I wanted to be upfront and real about that, because I think there are a lot of us who have experienced it.
I think there are a ton, and because we work in very similar markets, very similar type of people, and I was the same way. I mean, I remember distinctly when I was probably in my 20s going, I'm an independent woman. I don't need the same thing. I don't need a man. I don't know where we were taught this, that it was like, that's like, oh, I'm independent. And I love the fact that these, you, myself, the women that we know and are in our circles, we are strong and independent, but that doesn't mean that men are bad or that we don't need a good partnership, but we just kind of put on this armor like, I can do it all. And we started doing it all. And that's where I think we all hit those walls where it's like we might have appeared confident, but we weren't. We were just trying to do all the things so it looked like we were, to keeping up appearances almost.
Yeah, it's like we swung the pendulum too far in the other
Right.
direction, right? So, and I am fairly independent. That is part of my personality.
Yep.
Having said that, I believe all humans are wired for connection. So being independent doesn't mean not wanting to have strong relationships or intimate
For
relationships.
sure.
And again, I think I just swung too far in the opposite direction out of fear and doubt and, caring a lot about how things looked to other people,
Yeah.
and really putting on the masculine. And you said it, and I agree. There's nothing wrong with the
Right.
masculine. I don't advocate for women at the expense of men,
Right.
but I believe we all have masculine and feminine in us, and I was over rotating so hard on the masculine and
Yeah.
shoving aside, pushing down, ignoring anything that came up for me that would have fallen in the feminine, and it was creating an imbalance in my life and really a lot of pain.
It's exactly what I experienced. And I think so many high achieving driven women, and I still work with high achieving driven women, but at some point we get to that point where like, it's tipped. Cause I was the same, and I push back on the whole masculine feminine thing. My ex-husband used to talk about it all the time. I'm like, you're just crazy. I push back
Yeah.
so much on it. Cause I'm like, no, I'm not. No. And it was the shield. They call it the shield. You're putting up this shield. And we did, an episode a couple weeks ago on dropping the shield, and it's trying to figure out how do we just let go of these things. And unfortunately for me, and I think for you in reading the book, is that you hit a wall and you get to a point where you're like, oh my god, this isn't sustainable anymore. So, and I
Yeah.
know this is all about confidence, but it's really confidence to step away and say, this is not, it doesn't, you said it perfectly, it doesn't feel right on the inside. I'm off balance a little bit. So how did you,
Yeah.
what was that wall for you?
Yeah, so for me, it was just that, you know, the pain of living internally in a completely different way than it looked externally, and the effort and energy that it took to keep up appearances and to
Mm-hmm.
play the role and play the part, and not even really liking myself that much, and then in that, not even knowing myself very
Right.
much. It was painful for me to be in my own skin a lot of the times, and I think we can only live that way for so long before it hits a low point or a crossroads, or a point of no return, whatever you want to call it. And I don't know that there was a specific moment, but there was a specific period of time in my life where I was like, I just can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And I hated the idea that I was sending the message that I was this confident, person who had this beautiful, amazing life, and really spending most weekends waiting for Monday morning to arrive so that I could have purpose again, and,
Well,
basically faking it
you
all the
said that
time.
in there as I'm strumming through and looking at the book. You said that in there. You're like, it was just, you would wait, you'd get through your week and you're like, I'm waiting for Monday to get here. And some people like dread Mondays are my favorite days still. But you also said, what was interesting to me is you said you were having a lot of impact mentoring the women and I know that's part of why you stepped down from your role and started coaching more. But if we're mentoring women and they're modeling after what we're doing, we're leading by example. We always say in leadership, lead by example. Excuse me. But if you're doing that and you're modeling the things that aren't you, then it kind of perpetuates the cycle a little bit.
I would imagine you can relate to this too. So yes, there was that mentoring other women and feeling like I wouldn't want somebody to choose the path I was on.
Right.
But then it got elevated when I had my daughter. Now I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want her to live like
Yeah.
this."
Yeah. Well, and it's true, and I hate that, and I hate to even say this, and it's going to come out wrong, but you know me, I don't have my filter's broken, so I'll just say it. I have 3 daughters, and I've had several people ask me, were they going to go into the industry? Are they going to do this? And my answer all the time, this probably 10 years ago, last time I've been asked when I was still in finance, I said, I would not wish this on any of them. And I hated it because they're like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, we've got 3 built-in recruits. We've got 3 built in this. I'm like, I wouldn't wish this on I would not want them to go into this industry. And it wasn't the industry. It was just how I was perceiving that I needed to be to show up.
Yeah. So I felt and still feel to a certain extent the same way, but I will tell you, now that I've sort of worked in a lot of different industries, there are a lot of environments that I wouldn't want my daughter or any
Right.
of our daughters to be in.
I know. I know. It's scary. I mean, but I
An
think we
opportunity.
we have an opportunity to reshape that. I'm just looking at some questions that are coming in. We have an opportunity to reshape that with that, and that's part of what you were doing in here is, and the invalidation is for parking, is how we can be. The subtitle I love, how women can beat the confidence con, and that stuck out to me when you called it a con. I'm like, oh, but it kind of is. We were conned into thinking confidence looks like this, looks one way, the way you and I grew up or
Yeah.
the way we showed up in business, but it really in effect is something totally different.
But you hit the nail on the head. Con is that we think confidence is something external, right? It looks a certain way, it shows up a certain way. We get it from external sources like people or promotions or income or success or weight or whatever.
Yeah.
We have this belief that confidence is something that is going to be given to us or achieved after something happens, and that's the real con.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's tough. It's that vicious cycle. It's like we need to be confident, but we don't know how to be confident. And then where do we go? So if somebody's sitting here listening to this going, there's kind of two subsets. The first subset is the old us, the 20, 30-year-old us that's sitting here going, oh, yeah, no, but everyone would say I'm confident as heck. And I'm sitting here going, what the heck am I doing? And it wasn't like we weren't skilled or weren't performing well. It just, for
No.
me, I was performing well, doing well, advancing well. It just wasn't authentically me. It was kind of that, like you said, I had tipped a lot more masculine. I was way more, all things work, drive, the hustle, 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 which, I used to subscribe to the hustle culture. I don't like it right now. I think we need way more fun and way more excitement and way more balance. But for 20, 30-year-old us, where do they start with this?
Okay, so for the 20 or 30-year-old us, or really anybody, I think it's just the opportunity to really get to know yourself. Because my definition of confidence is when you know who you are, own who you're not, and choose to embrace all of it. So that first part, knowing who you are, there's a measure of self-awareness along with it. And I don't want to speak for all 20 or 30-year-olds, but I would imagine most of us in our 40s or 50s would tell you one of the greatest parts about aging is you get to know yourself more. You feel more comfortable in your own skin. You care less about all the other noise and the things and the people. I would invite those of you who might be tuning in who are younger to start that journey a little bit earlier. Discover yourself. Think about the things you know to be true about you at this point in your life. What are your superpowers? What are your strengths? What are your unique talents and abilities? And really become intimately acquainted with yourself. Part of that is, the sort of self-love movement. And I don't know about you, but sometimes from the outside looking in, that seems a little cheesy. But what I'm really talking about here is knowing, accepting, embracing yourself. We should first and foremost be somebody that we love. And side note on that, I spent a lot of my 20s trying to find the person who would love me, because I thought once I found that person that, confidence and feeling good and happiness and joy and all of that would come along with it. And those things do come along with being in a loving and healthy relationship. But the start of being in a loving and healthy relationship is to love and care for yourself first. And it eliminates some of the getting into some of the ugly, bad relationships that can really chip away at your confidence if you let it. So that's my fast answer for that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, and I think with everything, what's interesting is we weren't taught that, and I wish we could go back and I have a 20-year-old, I can't say child, but my oldest is in her mid-20s, and she's got an insane amount of confidence, but it's confidence because you're confident, not because you know what's going on around you. And there's not enough life experience, and that's so hard to help somebody in their 20s understand. Is like there's so many things you haven't been through. There's so many scenarios. And it's not that we're smarter because we're not. We're
Mhm.
just wiser because we've lived through it. We've made the mistakes. And I think for so many people, confidence changes over the years. You made an excellent point about loving yourself first in the relationships. I kind of joke with my daughters, I don't want them to get married until their mid 30s. I don't think they're going to listen to me, but it's because and the reason I always say that with people is because that is the age where I feel like people start, or at least historically, people have started to come into their own and understand who they are and start to embrace that more. And you said it. I mean, you're spot on. If you could, my wish for people that are younger is that you could start to love yourself and understand and know yourself sooner and not rely on the external. Because I was like you. I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, it was external validation, whatever which is why you 20-year-olds are doing crazy wackadoodle things. You're out there you're seeking the validation externally, right? You're not looking
Yeah.
at internally to say, does this feel good to me? Does this feel right to me? And as you get older and you start to go, okay, this makes some sense now. Maybe I was doing it wrong all these years. And you give less Fs. Far less Fs are given when you're older, right? Just because
100%.
it doesn't matter what other people are thinking.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And it's just like, how do I say this? It's validation feels good. I always say it's icing on the confidence cake. It's not the cake itself. But what you're saying is actually backed up by research as it relates to confidence. Young girls and young boys have about the same level of confidence until around age 8, somewhere between 7 and 9. And then we start seeing a separation. The working years, 20s and 30s, is where it's the furthest apart between, women and men. And of course, I don't speak for all women and all men, but generally speaking, when we enter the workforce, we're entering as women with less confidence than our male counterparts. We don't see it come back together until our 40s. And then in our 50s and 60s, women actually have more confidence than their male counterparts. I think a little of that is because part of the way, the con on the men's side is that their value is in their productivity, in their work, in their success when they hit their 50s and 60s, and that isn't what defines them so much anymore. They see a lowering of confidence. So
and
it's
women, we've
really
lived through childbirth, child rearing, and menopause. So by then we're like, bring it on, right? There's not a whole lot left you could throw at them. But you're right, and
We've done the hard.
Right, exactly. Well, and the confidence, like you mentioned, the 20s. There's tons of research that say men. There's this whole gender wage thing and all the wage gap and all that, which is a big thing to talk about. But one of the far less discussed items with the wage gap is that women don't advocate for themselves because they aren't thinking they're worth it. They walk in and a starting salary where females go, yeah, that's great, I'll take it, and a male says, no, I want higher. So the women, part of confidence is advocating for yourself. And I think we've done ourselves a disservice, and that does play into a lot of the challenges we're seeing in the world. Not fully the reason, but certainly play into it a lot with the jobs we go after and the paychecks.
Yeah, I say it's a piece of the puzzle.
Yep.
Something like the wage gap to me is a very complex issue
For
with
sure.
so many contributing factors.
Yep.
Our confidence is one of those contributing factors, and it's one that I like to focus on because I feel like it's something we have control over. It's something we can do something about.
Right.
I can't change somebody else's biases, backgrounds,
Exactly.
opinions, the work structure, the legal. I believe
Yep.
there's so many moving parts
Yeah.
that it's so daunting to me. The one thing, though, that I have power over is my own confidence, and it permeates in every aspect of my life, not just my salary or my work.
Well, and I'm a big believer in control the controllables. So if this is the one piece of that, if I'm worried about the wage gap, that's the one thing I control. Let's control that. Let's focus that, because you're right. Confidence, it expands to everything. I mean, it's work, it's relationships, it's romantic relationships, our kids, all of the pieces. And I loved in the book where you were talking about a lot of different things. I'm trying to flip it through again. You're talking about a lot of different things, but one of the things that stood out to me, I'm trying to think. It was when you were talking about becoming a mom. It goes back a little bit, but it made me start thinking about where we think confidence stems from, because you were saying the pressure to be pretty and sexy hasn't gone anywhere, and it was talking about after having a baby. You were talking about after having the baby and everything like that. I feel like with confidence, we've got an opportunity to redefine what it means for us. And for a lot of people, I mean, I have clients and friends who are fitness people and models and things like that, and their confidence does come from working out and how they look, and that is fantastic for them because that's part of their persona and what's important to them. But I think we each have an opportunity to figure out what will make me as an individual feel confident. That doesn't mean, that's not to excuse away bad behaviors or anything like that, or just letting yourself go, but I think everybody's confidence comes from different places.
I think everybody's confidence, I agree. It's different. It's unique to us.
Right.
Because it's about the relationship we have with ourselves. Here's what I'll say, because this falls into a little bit of a gray area, and one that I think is really hard for us to wrap our minds around. And I'm still working on this in my own mind. I think we have taken the word confidence and we use it in all sorts of different ways. And a lot of times when we mean something else. So being attractive, being sexy, feeling beautiful, being beautiful, there's nothing wrong with any of those things,
Right.
but it's not the same thing as being confident. So you talked about people in the fitness industry. I know a lot of people in the fitness industry as well, and we sort of have this ongoing dialogue and sometimes debate about it. And my opinion, and everybody gets to make up their own opinion, my opinion is working out and taking care of yourself and putting things in your body that are nutritious and that fuel you and that give you energy, all those things absolutely build your confidence, but not because of the way it makes you look. It builds your confidence because you are building and increasing the trust you have in yourself. You're saying, I matter, my body matters, my energy matters. You follow through on your commitments, which of course builds trust. If you say you're going to work out 5 days a week and you work out 5 days a week, guess what happens? Trust gets elevated. You understand your strength. You push past painful moments, and then you get to know that you can. It builds so much trust, which is why it's a confidence builder.
Right.
But you can't convince me that the way you look, the outcome of it, is what impacts your confidence. Here's why. We know people who have a disease and they work out because of being anorexic or bulimic or body dysmorphia or whatever, and they look a certain way, but confidence hasn't caught up to them for that. We also know people who don't have the stereotypical, perfect body or look a certain way that are extremely confident. I think what happens is working out and taking care of your body and nutrition and all of that builds confidence for all the reasons that we talked about. And then the byproduct for some people is you feel attractive, you look attractive, you get that icing on the cake, the validation, the compliments, the whatever it is that you're looking for. Nothing wrong with those things, but my personal opinion, and it would be pretty hard to convince me otherwise at this point. Now that, with the research I've done, is the way you look is independent of confidence. It's independent of trusting yourself.
Well,
they can go together, they absolutely cannot, and everything in between.
Well, and I think the trusting yourself is a big point, because I think some people, some people place higher emphasis on certain things. So maybe they trust themselves 100% with their fitness and their nutrition, but maybe not as much with business, where other people may say, hey, I trust that I'm going to do these healthy habits around building my business, or these healthy habits around nurturing my relationship or my marriage. So I think where everybody places their healthy habits, if you will, are different. So
yes. Well,
to that extent,
agree more. I think health is like, there's the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, there's all. And what I believe is that we all have one or two of those that are easier or more comfortable, or like kind of go-tos for us. For me, my mental health, that's easy. I read 60 books a year. I'm very I'm very learning oriented, very development oriented. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying it's an easy go-to. My physical health, I hate working out. I really, really do. I do it because I wanna trust myself. I do
Yeah.
it because I wanna take care of myself. I would do it because, I want to send a good example. There's a lot of reasons why I do it, but it's much harder for me. And then we know
Yeah.
people who, love working out and can't understand why other people don't do it.
Right.
I think we need to, you know,
Well, and that's where we need to understand
out.
where, right, we need to understand where people gain their strength and their, because everybody has different strengths. And so I believe anyone can build confidence and work on their confidence. But to your point, it may come in different. I'm not a workout person either. Don't enjoy it. Everybody's like, it'll make you feel good. No, it doesn't. I feel accomplished. I feel like I've done something, but the
Yeah.
results are, it's honestly less how I look to me. It's more the fact that I can run in my closet, throw something on, and not even worry about it. Like it's just like, oh, it fits.
Mhm.
I don't have to stretch or move or do any of that stuff. So everybody has a different reason for it. But the whole thing with beating the confidence con is trying to figure out what we can do to gain more for ourselves, whatever that looks like, whether it is around working out, appearances, business, performance. I think it starts with knowing what's important to each of us individually. How do
Couldn't agree more.
how do
I'm
people
not the
do that?
decider.
Yeah, right. So how do people decide that? Like, what do you like? I always tell people, what kind of gets you excited? What brings you joy? What brings you energy? What's moving you in the direction
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, this is where I want to go. Like, how do you?
Yeah,
Where do you
so I
start with
think
people?
confidence and authenticity are two different things, but they're like concentric circles, right? There's definitely overlap. And so I think there are a lot of things that anyone can do to build confidence, but I would invite you to think about, how do you build trust with people? How do people build trust with you? Therein gives you some insight into what's important to you, because confidence is about firm and bold trust in self, right?
Yeah.
And so, there are a few things that I think are generally true. Like, we tend to trust people who follow through and keep their commitments
Hmm.
more than we do people who don't. And so, a good place to start for any one of us is to keep our commitments more. This is not about perfectionism. Nobody keeps 100% of their commitments 100% of the time, but be somebody who follows through on your commitments. I think for women
Yeah.
specifically, a couple things we need to be mindful of. Number one, don't overcommit. We as
Yes.
women are often committing far too much and then putting ourselves in a situation where we can't help but fall short. And that leads
Right.
me to number two, is the commitments you make to yourself are equally, if not more important as it relates to confidence than the commitments you make to other people. And what I find often as women, we make so many commitments that the ones we make to ourselves end up being the ones that go by the wayside. And we can't build trust in ourselves if we are constantly breaking the commitments we make to ourselves.
And I think that is critical to me and to so many people, because we let I've said this before. I'll let myself down well before I'm going to let anybody else down. So how do we
Yeah.
make that switch? Because I think that's very common, not just to women but men as well. I think women do it more, but how do we switch that? Do we like, okay, the commitments I make to myself are what is building my confidence? Because I agree with you 100%. I don't think the commitments I'm keeping to other people are building my confidence. It's building their confidence in me. Like they're
Mhm.
confident that I will get things done, but it's not building my confidence in myself. So how do we switch from I'm not even gonna say others focused to self focused, but how do we make that switch to like, all right, I need to honor what I'm saying for me to be able to be more
Yeah.
confident.
I mean, it is a challenge, I'm not gonna lie, because I have the same thing. Like, if I
Yeah,
tell you I'm gonna do something,
for
you can take
sure.
it to the bank. If I tell myself, it's like, this can be renegotiated anytime I want, right?
Exactly, and it
Um,
usually is with me. That's where the gym
yeah,
thing comes in. I'll renegotiate the gym all day long. I'm like, "Oh, I've gotta go help somebody." But we do
yeah.
this. Why do we do this?
Well, I think because we have been conditioned to care so much more about what it looks like,
Yeah.
on the outside looking in. We care about what other people think of us at a very high level. And unfortunately, one of the downsides is we've stopped caring so much about what we think about ourselves. Think about that for a second. Like, what does it say if
Yeah.
we're willing to break the commitments we make to ourselves on a regular basis? It doesn't say very much about how we think about ourselves. So for me, just putting it in the mind frame of, I'm going to work out because I made that commitment to myself. That's the only reason I'm doing it, because I'm going to follow through on a commitment that I make to myself because I'm worthy of that. And
Yep.
because that builds my trust and my confidence. And of course, that's going to help me in all other aspects of my life. The other thing I would think about too is to make sure that commitments that you make to yourself are ones that actually matter to you,
Yeah.
that move you in the direction of what's important and what really matters to you. I think a
Yeah.
lot of times we may still make commitments to ourselves based on what we think we should
Yes.
or what other people are telling us. Like, so um, I think you did this, and so I want to be careful that I'm not knocking this. But there was a period of time where 75 hard was like
Yep.
everywhere I looked. Everybody was telling me I should do 75
Yep.
hard and blah, blah. And I was like, no, that is never going to happen. Like, I will literally never
Yeah.
do that. That is not a desire of mine.
Yeah.
That's not moving me in the direction. Do I
Yeah.
have any beef with anybody else who did it? No. If that moves you in the direction of what's important to you, if
Yeah.
that feels right, then you should do that. But I think a lot of times we make commitments even to ourselves based on what other people are telling us or that we think we should. There's a
Yeah.
difference between getting outside of your comfort zone in the direction of towards what matters
Yeah.
versus doing something just because somebody tells you you should
Yeah.
or because you think you should or whatever.
That's a really good example, and I'll tell you what, because yeah, you're right. I did that when it was a little over a year ago, and I've talked about it a ton on here because it was great for. I did it because I'm like, I was intrigued by it. I didn't have anybody tell me to do it
Mhm.
because honestly, nobody was going to tell me to do it because I don't think anybody thought I actually could do it. So no one was suggesting it, but I was like, okay, this is cool. This is some definitely out of my comfort zone, building some habits. So I did it. Now, what stood out to me, I gained confidence doing it because that was probably the first time I kept every single commitment I made to myself. And there were a lot of things,
Exactly.
but what the challenge I had and why I won't repeat it, and actually we're looking at creating not something similar but customizable, is there were components of that I absolutely loved, that those habits I've pulled with me and stuck with. And I built some confidence in sticking with those. But there were parts of that where it's so prescriptive that I'm like, this one thing out of the 10 doesn't make sense for me. So that's
Mhm.
where I love the concept of it, but what we're looking to create is something a little bit more customizable, because everybody's thing is different. And like I tell my clients, everything you do should be intentional. It should be either bringing you joy or moving you in the direction of a goal or something you want to accomplish, something you want life to look like. But you're right, because it's for a lot of our financial clients, they're presenting their plans now for the year, and they'll send them to me and like, oh, take a look at this, and I had one person I just started working with sent me their old plan. I'm like, it literally, like, I could have written this in my sleep. There was no passion to it. There was no why. It was just so cookie cutter. And and that was my response, was every single thing on there is something that somebody else told you should do. I can tell that
Mhm.
without even knowing you. It was so prescriptive where it's like, really? I mean, if you're going to do a business plan, let's do a business plan. Let's not just say,
Right.
I'm going to do this because so-and-so said so. But I think you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had some people, I get asked about 70. That's a great example because I get asked about that a lot. And some people I'm like, you're not going to like it. Like, tell me why you want to do it. That's always my first question, is tell me why. Now, if they want to do it because they're
Yeah.
workout freaks and they love to carry on a gallon jug of water, fantastic. But yeah, but it really is
Well,
customizable. It's what do you want for you? What's going to build confidence for
yeah.
you?
I have two thoughts. Number one, I have no doubts that doing 75 hard built your confidence because it's all about keeping commitments that are
Yeah.
hard to keep.
Yes.
And so, that's a really good choice. I know if I did something like that, I wouldn't keep the commitments because I don't really want to do it.
There was
that's
no
not
alcohol
what-
for 75 days, Nicole. There was
I know.
that was
It sounds miserable. But
my kids looked at the list and like, you're never going to be able to do this. And that was like, challenge accepted.
Yeah.
I mean, part of it was a prove 'em wrong type of thing too, which is,
totally.
yeah, it's fine.
Well, and I think the second thing that you're saying that I completely agree with is I'm sort of over this one size fits all
Right.
approach to everything. Like
Yes.
I'm tired of reading books where people are like, this is the one way you have to do it, or being,
Yep.
hearing people being coached or being mentored where it's like, this is the way and the only way. Either you do it this way and you'll succeed,
Yep.
or, you do one variation and you failed miserably. It's like, no, there are a lot of ways to skin a cat.
There are a ton, and
And what matters.
yeah, you're right. But it's customizable, and I think if you try to, maybe that's part of the confidence con that we fed into, is that we thought it was one size fits all, that it had to be done. And what's interesting is a lot of my private coaching clients come to me because they've had, managing partners or other people say, I don't know how to coach you the way you do it. I'm like, hey, I'm not going to change your results, but we can change how you get there, because there's a ton of different ways. And I think I'm never going to get up at 4 a.m. and go to the gym and start my day at 5. It is not going to happen.
No.
And I can probably,
I don't know very many moms who can.
right? But I can probably pull 5 books or 10 articles that tell you all successful people do that. And I think that may be part of the con, is anytime somebody says everyone does this, all successful people do this, then you've got to really start to think critically about, is that going to work for me?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Don't even get me started on the 5 a.m. club. Like, that is,
I am not in the 5 a.m. club.
mine.
I used to stay up until 5 when I was in my 20s, but I was not actively getting up. Yeah.
I am president of I get up whenever the F I want club.
I like that.
That's my club.
We should make shirts.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. No, but I say this in the book, and it was one of the reasons I wrote the book, is because we are learning about success professionally, about confidence, almost entirely from the masculine lens. And again, not anti-masculine, it's just an imbalance. 92% of business books as of a year and a half ago were written by men. Most of us are being mentored, trained, and coached by men. And so as women, what sometimes happens is we're being asked to separate from our own authenticity. We're being asked to do things that are not just outside of our comfort zone, but are inauthentic.
Yeah.
And it's creating a lot of problems. Like you, I get reached out to a lot where people are like, I can't coach this person.
Yep.
Can you step in? And it's like, just doing it differently. And oddly, more often than not, when I'm coaching women, we're focused on doing less, not doing more, and how they achieve more. And it's this, like, it's so contradictory to what they're being told in their professional environments. It's really hard to unwire and rewire for a lot of people, myself
fun
included.
Though,
it's so important.
it's important, and it's fun. Like when you see it click, because it is. And I kind of joke. I'm like, I will say I have male private clients as well. My females probably work less hours and produce more, and scale more and quicker, and they do, because they get a lot done. But to your point, if we're doing things in a way that's inauthentic, that may be more masculine or something like that, we're not honoring the parts of us that are more nurturing, that are more relationship focused, that are more caregiving. If we're not allowing those pieces in, the confidence we're building, it is a little bit inauthentic, and it is harder. It's harder to sustain. And I think it didn't hit me. Like I said, I pushed back on the whole thing for a while, and I would say probably late 40s was when I finally started going, okay, this feels good. This feels right. I'm feeling better about myself. I'm feeling better. And that's when I started attracting the right clients, the right friends, the right relationship, but it was because I was right with me. And it's still a work in progress. Like, I'm still a hot mess on any given day, as I'm sleeping in. Same. But we're all a work in progress, but we've got to move towards the things that are building up the confidence and the feeling good about where we are and who we are.
Yeah. And I would add too, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well, Kristen, is I interact with a lot of men who are looking for a little bit more of that balanced approach as well. I think we've over-rotated so much on the grit, grind, hard work, long hours as a badge of honor, cold, so much focus on activity, not as much on relationship. Those types of things. I think I'm hear, well, maybe it'd be the men who reach out to me that so of course I'd hear it from them, but
Yeah.
I'm hearing more and more from men that they're craving a little bit more of that balance as well.
I think you mentioned earlier the pendulum swung so far, and it's starting to come back to the middle. And I think it'll probably swing too far the other way. And then, but there's this balance in the middle of still being able to be great at our jobs and productive members of our company or companies or whatever our careers hold, but also being present for the people. Because I feel like in order to truly be, you know, confident and not need the external validation. I think so many of us were seeking it other places, and to have it from
Yeah.
within side or higher power or however you want it, to have that type of validation, that feels good. That's when I think we really can sink in and start to do our best work. It's a
Yeah.
lifelong journey to get there for sure.
I couldn't agree more. It's that progress over perfection.
Yep.
Always work in progress. And I mean, I literally wrote a book on confidence, and I have days where I feel like I have none, right?
Yep.
And then I have days where I feel like, I can trust myself to do anything, and I vacillate in between. One of the things that I love about this focus, this obsession that I have with confidence, is it has taught me how to recover quicker, how to dust myself off, stand back up, get back into action faster than I would have if left to my own devices. And it also has taught me to honor and embrace things that I wouldn't have in the past, whether it be, that more feminine side, listening, slowing down, doing less, honoring my emotions, letting them, knowing that they're telling me something.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. I mean, I said this on my podcast. I am coming into this year with no business plan. This is the first time I've ever done this.
I
I'm
saw that.
always,
Yeah.
business plan, strategies, lead indicators, lag indicators. I always have, because, I that's my history,
Yep.
right? That's the way you do business. And I'm not in that place right now. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to honor this. The year is an arbitrary thing. And I would be putting together a plan and a strategy for the sake of doing it. And that seems counterproductive to me. And so as of January 5th, as we sit here today, I have no plan. And it's scary as all get out, but I know that I know that this is the right approach for me right now.
Well, and I love that you're honoring that, because I think that's a big thing is people need to, if you're feeling that nudge, that means there's something to it. It doesn't mean not having, I'm a strategy girl, but not having a plan doesn't mean, I have people that have plans and don't execute. And I have people that,
Right.
like you, that have no plans. I have no doubt you're going to execute on everything you need to, like all the right things are going to fall into place. So, all right, as we wrap, is we're obviously going to put links to where people can grab this book. It's easy to find on Amazon. It's getting some really good reviews too. You guys should check it out. But what would you say, like if somebody's listening, and I think our audience, we're all growth oriented, but it's a very broad. I mean, we've got people that are super young, like high school listening, and then I've got some people in their 80s. So we've got a broad spectrum. Where do they start? So if you were going to give one piece of advice and you can batch it by generation if you want to, but one piece of advice on somebody who's just not feeling like, man, I need to up this confidence a little bit. I need to feel better about me and my
Yeah.
choices. Where would they start?
There are lots of places to start. So if this one doesn't resonate with you, then, go to the book and find another way to start, or find what works for you. But if I could give you one thing, it would be start with the things that I know to be true about me at this point in my life. Sit in a room with a pen and piece of paper and ask yourself about you. What are those strengths? What are those unique abilities? What comes easier to you than most? What is the consistent feedback that you get that you believe to be true about yourself as well? What are those strengths, superpower? And challenge yourself to keep asking the question. I've done this with enough people to know that the average amount that people come up with are 6 things that they know to be true about themselves. We are complex humans with years of
Yes.
lived experience. You cannot convince me that there are only 6 things to know about you. And I know that when I ask people to do this for a loved one with a time limit. So if I say, think about the things you know to be true about your significant other or your child or your best friend, the average they'll come up with in a short period of time is 32. And so we're not spending enough time getting to know ourselves. So in order to trust yourself, you need to know yourself. And so that would be the place, in my opinion, to start. Get to know who you are, what makes you you. You're the
I love
only you there has ever been, the only you there will ever be. And that makes you freaking magical in my mind. So get to know the magic that is you. And then there's the part of getting to know what's not meant for you, what you're not meant for. But that'll come later. Start with the self-awareness piece.
I love that.
I think is a good first step.
I love that. I love the question. That's awesome. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, okay, I write down things, but things you know to be true about you. And these are good things, guys. You can't start writing your bad stuff. That's down the road.
Right.
But things that you know to be true about you. I always talk about finding your unique fire and using your strengths, and that fits in so well. But I love the way you worded that. So start journaling, writing down the things you know to be true about you, so you can reinforce those throughout your daily life.
And can I throw in one thing?
absolutely
Watch
can.
for softening or disclaimers or kneecapping your statements about yourself. So it might look like this: I'm pretty smart. Cross out the pretty. You can just be smart. Or I'm honest to a fault. Cross out the to a fault. You're honest. If somebody takes fault with that, that sounds like a them problem to me.
Yep.
Make these very powerful and clear statements. We have a tendency to sort of water them down a little bit. That's not the place for this.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I call the wishy-washy. Get rid of the wishy-washy language. Maybe, possibly. So.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate it. And we're going to put a link to Nicole's book, Validation is for Parking, How Women Can Beat the Confidence Con. So I want you guys all to check it out. This is a topic that we are going to continue discussing through our year and as we go forward. And Nicole, thank you for being with us. We'll put your contact info too so people can reach out with you. But I can't wait to see what's coming next for you in your non-business plan year. I think it's going to be some cool stuff. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it.
Ease and flow.
Ease and flow. That's right.
Kristen, thank you so much for having me and for your support and friendship. It means a lot.
Always. Yeah, I'm so glad. I'm so glad to see your success. It's fun. It's really fun to kind of, open up the book and like, I know I have a shelf at home that like all the books that my friends have written is like on the top, and it's cool because that, it's a lot. I mean, I know that. I know how much work you put into this, and it's amazing. So congratulations. You should be very, very, very proud. So you can write that on your little sheet. So, all right. Well, thank you again for being with us. You guys check out the book, and we will be back here again next week for another episode of Renew. But in the meantime, go out, be confident, write down some good stuff, and make sure you're taking some time to love yourself. So we will see you next week.